We'll use the Dog Pictures program to learn how to implement multiple forms in a program. First, we'll look at how to properly rename a form. We right-click in the Solution Explorer and then select Rename. Make sure the .vb extension is there. We'll call this Main Form. Again, this is the best place to rename your form, not down in the Properties. Right-click on that form, the .vb in the Solution Explorer. That will help to change all the file names properly as well. To add a new form, go to Project and Add Windows Form. That's the simplest way to do it. Make sure that the extension is .vb and then call the form what you want to call it. We're going to have a form dealing with Clifford the big red dog, so we'll call this Clifford Form. Looks just like all the other forms we have dealt with in our previous programs. We'll add some controls to it. First, a picture box, because we want to have a picture of Clifford on the form. We'll get it to the size we want and name it Pick Clifford. We'll want to have an image of Clifford the big red dog in this picture box, so we'll import one. There he is. Of course, he's a big red dog with a big image. We'll have to change that with the size mode. We'll zoom in. We're going to use a couple of labels. The first label will simply be a prompt. So we won't bother to give it a new name. We will change the font size, make it a little easier to read. And the prompt will just be Clifford Says. Our second label will need a good name because the message that Clifford delivers can change. So we'll call this label LBL Message. We'll make its auto size property false. That way we can size it the way we wish. We'll make its font larger. We'll align it in the center and change the default text to woof. Next, we'll get a button. We'll use this to close this form. And that's why we'll call this button BTN Close. The text will be close. We'll put an ampersand in front of the C. And we'll increase the font. Not a surprise that the coding for this is the same that we've used before. Me.close will close this form. So we've got a lot of things going on this Clifford form. There's our main form. When we press Start, what will happen? Well, the main form comes up and operates as it always has. We can change our startup form by going to Project and the Properties at the bottom. Startup form is one of the choices. There's main form and Clifford form. If we switch it to Clifford form, the Clifford form comes up first. And notice that closing on the startup form closes the entire program. We'll switch it back to main form. And when we close this, it exits the program. Closing any other form that is not the startup form will simply just close that form, not the entire program. That's why it matters not only for the beginning of the program, which form starts it up, but also to make a program entirely close. All right, we're going to make another button here that we can use to actually bring up an instance of our Clifford form. We'll call this BTN Clifford. And we'll change the text here to Where is Clifford? Now we'll write some code that can make this other form appear. First, we'll create an instance of the Clifford form. When we design these forms, they're really blueprints, kind of like the blueprint for a house. It's not the house itself, it's a plan for a house. But now FRM Clifford is an actual Clifford form, just like a house is an actual instance of a blueprint. There are a couple of ways to display forms. One of them is .showDialog, and that's usually the one you want. We'll check this one out first. This is called modal, M-O-D-A-L. The main form will suspend its action now until the Clifford form is done. So there it is. The Clifford form came up. We'll press close. It went away. Of course, since it wasn't the startup form, it's the me.close in the startup form that makes the program end. But if we try to do anything on our main form while the Clifford form is up, it won't work. We try clicking on menu items, and now we'll try to click on some buttons. Those won't work until the Clifford form closes because it's show dialog. We'll put an apostrophe in front of that and check out a second way to bring up a form with simply .show. This is modeless. And we'll discover we can still work on the main form. We can actually click multiple times on where is Clifford and get a bunch of Clifford forms to show up. There's one. We can return to our main form and still work things there. Here's the Clifford form we already had, but we can click where is Clifford and get a second Clifford form, and we can click it again and get a third Clifford form. Kind of a mess. There could be some instances where you would want to use .show. Usually you'll want to use .showDialog. Let's analyze a little further how the execution of code on the main form suspends when we use the modal.showDialog. Here's a LBL name.txt you saw Clifford. So we'll click where is Clifford. Notice that the label has not yet changed because the action is suspended until we close the Clifford form. Now, the code that said to change the label to you saw Clifford executed. However, if we use .show, there is no suspension of the action. The code continues to execute. So when we click where is Clifford, right away there's a continuation and the label changed to you saw Clifford. So again, another difference between modal and modeless. .showDialog and .show. We'll return to the modal method with .showDialog as we next see how we can access controls on a different form. We're currently on the main form, but maybe we'd like to edit the message that Clifford has to say. So we will type FRM Clifford, which is the instance of Clifford form that we've created, .lbl message, which is on the Clifford form, .text, and now Clifford will say, I am a big red dog. There it is. So that is how we can have one form access the controls on a different form. Well, we've looked at me.close. Another thing that can be used is me.hide, to hide a form. All the information is still retained on that instance of the form. So we'll have this button for hiding. We'll call it btn hide and have the text hide. And the code for this button is simply me.hide. Well, we'll need to test this out. Let's put a different message inside FRM Clifford's LBL message. We'll have Clifford say, I am back. And we'll also use show dialog to bring it up a second time. And we'll also put a message box in here so we can hold up the action after the first time we bring up FRM Clifford. Clifford says, I'm a big red dog. We hide it. Let's see Clifford again. And now it says, I am back. It's the same FRM Clifford. So hopefully you see the difference between .close and .hide. Let's look at a way we can check to make sure users really want to close a form. We'll go to Clifford Form Events here in the code and pick Form Closing, not Form Closed. Form Closing is going to happen right before a form closes. Form Closed is just after a form closes. So right before a form closes, we'll double check and really make sure the users want to close this form. We'll use an if. So if messagebox.show, and then we'll put in the prompts that we need. Are you sure you want to say goodbye to Clifford? We'll have the title of this message box as confirm. And then we'll select message box buttons yes, no. You see there are many choices. We've usually dealt with OK. And then we'll actually see if it equals dialog result dot yes, which means they do want to close the form up. So that means e.cancel will equal false, which may seem a little odd to you at first. You might think it ought to be true, but it is false. That means we're going to continue to close the form. Otherwise, we'll make e.cancels be true. You don't close the form. E is in those parameters as a form closing event args. Let's see it work. User presses close. Are you sure you want to say goodbye? We'll click no. So it did not go ahead and do the closing process. When we click yes, it did. And again, that's the form closing event. It executes just before a form closes. The form closed event, that will run right after a form closes.